And some additional supplementaries from, first from Ivan McKee.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. After last year's general election, we heard great boasts from Ruth Davidson that her troop of Scottish Tory MPs would fight for Scotland's interests and more powers for Holyrood. Does the First Minister think we've seen much evidence of that this week?
First Minister.
No. As I said earlier on, I think we're still trying to locate a backbone amongst the group of Scottish Tory MPs. This is a really serious issue, Presiding Officer. I think we know from the committee report that was published that across this chamber, MSPs of all parties think that the withdrawal bill in its current form represents a power grab on this Parliament. And yet when there was an amendment lodged by Labour in the House of Commons this week to help rectify that, instead of supporting that amendment, the Scottish Tory group voted with the government against the interests of Scotland. In fact, there's not been one single occasion on the part of any of the Scottish Tory MPs, I think with the exception of one measly abstention somewhere along the line, there's not been one single occasion where a single Scottish Tory MP has voted in the interests of Scotland against the Westminster Government.
Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Perhaps on a more consensual note, I take this opportunity to congratulate Sorcha Cantwell in the gallery today, who was recognised as a Clean Up Scotland hero by Keep Scotland Beautiful for her time dedicated to cleaning up plastic pollution on our beaches. Will the First Minister explain how the Scottish Government can best encourage and support such individual and community and sectoral initiatives, for example with the supply of equipment, to help us all tackle this global problem?
First Minister.
Well, I thank Claudia Beamish for raising this. Can I take the opportunity to pay tribute to the work of Sorcha Cantwell? I think her work serves as a reminder that all of us have a responsibility to do more to tackle the throwaway culture and the issue of plastics, particularly in our seas. In fact, I think the Environment Secretary has just met with Ms Cantwell to discuss the work that she's been doing. The Scottish Government, as I said last week, has been leading the way in taking action for some time now. We've already introduced a more comprehensive carrier bag charge. We will develop a deposit return scheme for Scotland, and last week Rosanna Cunningham announced plans to ban the manufacture and sale of plastic cotton buds, and we'll become the first country in the UK to do so. We're also currently considering how to tackle the issue of plastic straws and disposable coffee cups. I know there's a need to go even further. The Cabinet discussed this on Tuesday, how we continue to make sure that Scotland is a leader in tackling this issue that is such a blight on our environment.
Question for Richard Lockhead.
Can I ask the First Minister what discussions the Scottish Government has had with the UK Government regarding concerns expressed by the Scottish whisky industry regarding the possible consequences of Brexit for customs arrangements?
First Minister.
The Scottish Government is in regular dialogue with the Scottish whisky industry. We are aware of their concerns regarding the introduction of a new computer system by HM Revenue and Customs for collecting duties and taxes for goods entering and leaving the UK. The industry believes that leaving the EU will increase transactions fivefold. That's an extra burden on industry which is completely unnecessary and is one of the many reasons we've argued that leaving the EU will significantly weaken our economy compared to continued membership of the EU, but the least damaging option is to remain within the single market, and I hope that's something members right across the chamber will support.
Richard Lockhead.
I thank the First Minister for her answer, and I'm sure she's aware that 90% of Scottish whisky is exported, and a third of these exports go to the EU, which represents 10% of all Scottish exports to the EU. Is the First Minister aware that with the UK Government rushing headlong into a hard Brexit, there's now increasing concerns being expressed by the Scottish whisky industry over the potential for confusion and chaos at customs posts, given that the industry needs plenty of advance notice of new arrangements, a smooth process, and to avoid congestion and delay in getting their goods to market? And now, with the clock ticking, will the First Minister continue to apply maximum pressure on the UK Government to recognise the importance of the Scottish whisky industry and indeed Scottish food and drink generally, and also similar concerns have been expressed by Rotterdam Port as well about the impact of Brexit? And does she agree that this is a perfect example of why the Conservative Party's political dogma and determination to leave the single market and customs union is detrimental to Scotland's national interests?
actually believe that the Tories were groaning and moaning through a question about one of our most important industries. I think it speaks volumes. The whisky industry, as Richard Lochhead has said, contributes hugely to Scottish exports. And I think the concerns of the whisky industry provide a case study in the self-destructive futility of leaving the single market. But it's not just whisky that has these concerns. The Food Sector Resilience Group, chaired by the Scottish Government, brings together associations across the food and drink supply chain, as well as other public sector bodies. That group is meeting as we speak and will be discussing the impact of customs issues and possible disruption of ports in England, which could have a really damaging effect on all of Scotland's exporters. It's exactly that kind of concern that drives our analysis that Brexit could hit our GDP to the tune of up to £2,300 for every person in Scotland. I don't want us to leave the EU at all, but if the UK is intent on that, then we must stay within the single market. I remember the day not long after the EU referendum when Ruth Davidson stood in this chamber and challenged me to make sure we protected our place in the single market. Now she just meekly does as she's told. Well, we will continue to stand up for Scotland's interests.
Question number 5, Finlay Carson.
To ask the First Minister what support the Scottish Government is providing to the inshore fishing industry.
First Minister.
The Scottish Government recognises the importance of fishing to many of our coastal communities. Through our inshore fisheries strategy, we're working with fishing businesses and organisations around Scotland to deliver a more sustainable, profitable and well-managed inshore sector. This includes conservation measures for important inshore species, supporting inshore fisheries groups and a £1.5 million programme of investment to improve data collection from our inshore fishing fleet.
Finlay Carson.
I thank the First Minister for her response. The First Minister is aware of the great importance that the scallop fishing industry plays in the economy of the south west of Scotland. And I believe that the First Minister was scheduled to discuss issues regarding the 2012 Fisheries Management Agreement with the Isle of Man's Chief Minister this morning, and I sincerely hope those discussions were successful. Concerns about the potential of the Isle of Man introducing conservation measures, which were more about protectionism than conservation, were raised by me back in August 2017 in a letter to the Cabinet Secretary Fergus Ewing. Can I ask, why did it take until late December for the Cabinet Secretary to take any meaningful action on the concerns of the scallop fleet? Why it has taken the intervention of the First Minister to sort out the mess, partly due to the late intervention of Fergus Ewing, and will she apologise on behalf of her Cabinet Secretary for the unnecessary inconvenience and deep concern caused to the Scottish scallop fleet and associated businesses?
First Minister.
Well, let me deal quickly, first of all, with Finlay Carson's comments about the Scottish Government. And let me just, I suppose, put on record some of the comments of those who work in the sector. So, Chief Executive of the Scottish Whitefish Producers Association, great support for our scallop fishermen from the Scottish Government. The West Coast Sea Products, which is a Kirkcudbright-based processor owner of vessels, welcome the action being taken by the Scottish Government to invoke the dispute resolution process. So the Scottish Government has been acting on behalf of our scallop fishermen. Now, as Finlay Carson says, I actually spoke with the Chief Minister of the Isle of Man this morning. I made very clear our opposition to the restrictions that the Isle of Man has put in place. I made very clear our view, which I accept that the Isle of Man disagree with, but our strong view that those restrictions actually breach the fisheries management agreement that is in place. And I also said that we would use the dispute resolution mechanism should a resolution not be found. I'm glad to say the discussion with the Chief Minister was very constructive and very positive this morning. The Isle of Man will review their position, and I am very hopeful that we will reach a mutually satisfactory resolution of this within the next week. So hopefully we will get to a position on this which is in the interest of our scallop fishermen, and it will be because partly of the action that Fergus Ewing has been taking.
Question number 6, Monica Lennon.
To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to the campaign for Freedom of Information in Scotland's campaign Get It Minuted.
First Minister.
The Scottish Government is fully committed to openness and transparency. I agree with the campaign's view of the importance of ensuring appropriate records of business are taken. Where meetings involving ministers meet the criteria set out in the Civil Service Guidance, then appropriate records are routinely taken.
Monica Lennon.
I thank the First Minister for her reply. In my hand, I have a list compiled by STV journalist Aidan Kerr of 40 unminuted ministerial meetings and counting. This widespread practice of failure to record must end. So I commend the Get It Minuted campaign, which is simply asking that agendas, notes and minutes of Scottish Government meetings are held. The First Minister told the Chamber earlier on she's fine with the way the Justice Secretary is conducting government business when asked about the unminuted meeting with the former chair of the SPA. Sticking with justice, her official, Paul Johnston, met with the Chief Constable on the 30th of November. Was that meeting also unminuted? If so, doesn't the First Minister accept it's not only a bad look, but this practice is simply wrong? So will she make a commitment today that from now on, all important government meetings will be minuted?